Welcome back, Blade Gang. This old sword is with you, and we have a new TwoSun on the block today. This is designed by Night Morning, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, older designers for TwoSun knives. This is the TS334. And you know, I'm just going to go blotto one of these days and not even give you the number and say this is a nice knife. They are starting to do a couple of things, and I don't think this one has it. Yeah, it does. They are starting to put the numbers, not names, the numbers on the blades. So one thing at least is when I pull a knife out and want to talk about it, I can look at the blade instead of looking up the design and trying to figure out when I got it and look at invoices and bills and that kind of thing. But it's a smaller knife. One would say it's a small knife because it's got under a 3-inch blade. You wouldn't really know it because we've got a good amount of handle for the size of the blade. And we're going to give you all the measurements in a moment. It has this really neat burlap micarta, I'm going to call it that for lack of a better name. I first saw this exact same handle material on a Kubi Raven designed by Jelly Jerry back well over a year ago. And this is Thumbstud opener, and the thumb studs fit in that little notch and lock up on the frame in that notch very nicely. Now somebody today on Instagram told me, oh, it's a great front flipper. And then I had to look back and notice that you've got a little bit of a ramp there, and you can thumb flip it, front flip it, but not really to my liking. So, I mean, if I pick up the knife, take it out of the pocket, and it's in my hand, my thumb is right there. So I'm going to use the thumb stud, guys. I'm not going to do knife acrobatics. I'd save those for ballet songs. Anyway, sorry if I'm being harsh about that. I'm sure there are many of you out there who can pick this thing up and flick it with a finger so easily. But again, I don't want to have to do that when I'm already right here. So for me, it's a matter of personal taste and what have you. For me, that is the best way to open it. Okay, so I'm going to take a tour around the knife again in a minute, but let's get some measurements, shall we? And we'll put them up on the screen as I talk about them. It's 7 1/4 inches, just a shade more than 7 1/4 overall. And you know what? White Mountain gave the blade length as under 3 inches, and I'm seeing that it is just a hair over 3 inches with a cutting edge of 3 inches. So it ain't that small. And let's keep going because I'll drift away. Handle thickness 0.58. Blade thickness in millimeters 3.5. Let's try that again. So I know I get hung up on stuff. 3.6. Good hefty blade for the size. And it's, I would call it a spear point. It's got kind of some tactical look to it with that big swedge on top. And you've got a grind that's a little over half the width of the blade. And you've got that swedge coming out. It doesn't quite terminate at the tip, which is interesting. That gives you a little more blade thickness. Finally, and then we can talk about it some more, we have the weight, which is 4.25 ounces, 4 1/4 ounces. A little heavier than you might expect for the size of the blade. Steel liners. It's got their now pretty much proprietary for the G10 and micarta model's clip, which is a spring steel clip. Works quite well, slides in and out of the pocket beautifully. The clip is inset into the handle, but the screws are domed, so they didn't go with flathead screws. I don't know what it's going to take for manufacturers to start using the proper screws on their deep carry clips. But they don't get in the way too much, so that's the end of my complaint. The clip does not switch to the left side, and we have these really interesting pivot surrounds. Some people don't like them. It does say made in Yangjiang, China. It reminds me of the stamping on the end of a cartridge. Head stamp, I believe you call it. TwoSun. And the same thing there. I mean, if you don't read it and get into all of that, it's got a nice look to it. It does have sort of, and even the Torx right there, which appears to be a T8, looks like a primer indent. So it kind of looks like a primer and a shell casing. I don't know what you think, but that was the first impression that I had. Very nice contoured handle. A black G10 backspacer. And again, that's not a stop pin. That is a kind of a narrow spacer. Can't call it a barrel spacer, because it don't quite look like a barrel. Oh, that is actually your stop for your closed position, so my bad. That's your stop for your closed position. There's your stops for your open position. And by the way, that jimping is rather ineffective in this position because it falls below the surface of the handle. So you really can't take advantage of it. But it is grabby out here and could even allow you to roll it open, although if I wanted to roll it open I could use the thumb studs. You can middle finger flick it without any problem if that's your game. And I think it's a nice size for EDC, even tactical. I mean, that's a neat pakal knife. I know making everything into a pakal knife these days is sort of an obsession. But it's a very neutral handle. Now what does it remind me of? Well, it reminds me a little of another version of this guy, the Wee Banter. It wasn't until I put it side by side before the review that I realized it is bigger than the Wee Banter, fairly substantially, but kind of in the same ballpark. Wee Banter is very flat. G10, S35BN, and oh yes, this is 14C28N. So I kind of prefer it to D2 these days. It's a, I keep saying this, it's a steel that was made for cutlery, made for kitchen cutlery, made for even sporting knives and what have you. There's a good blurb on it out at Knife Steel Compositions. If you have that app, just plug in 14C28N. And he'll tell you a lot about it, including the composition and a little background on it. But this is a very fidgety knife, and it is a very comfortable knife. All 4 fingers with some left over. So it's a really right-sized knife if you don't want to carry a large EDC. Perfect size, I think. Comes through with a good edge. How good is that edge? Well, I guess we have to demo that, don't we? Here we go. We'll see if I don't do an epic fail today. Wow. So that lasers through pretty well. And of course I'm left with the usual stuff on the table. Anyway, let's put it side by side with Griptilian, just so you can see that comparison. Griptilian's bigger, but not hugely bigger. I don't know, let's see. About an inch longer overall. And the blade on the Griptilian really only about half an inch longer. Really excellent design by Night Morning. I think it's a good way to go with smaller knives. I mean, it's a small knife while not being a small or too small a knife. It's smooth and slick on the handle, but you do have jimping here that's kind of grippy, although it is on the liner lock. Liner is easy to disengage, and the detent's not going to be anything crazy. It's crisp, but then again, for this type of knife, not having a flipper, you know, it's designed so you can roll it out, no problem. But you just put a little bit of pressure there, it flies open all the way, all the time. Clip is not a hot spot that I sense at all. Kind of melts right into the palm. It's a pretty good design of the clip. They don't point that up in the air so it's not sticking you in the palm. They sort of bend it back down. And you got plenty of height in here for just about any fabric, even though you got those two round head screws sticking up just a bit. So there we have what I deem to be a really nice new TwoSun design, the TS334 by Night Morning. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe. I'll be back with more good stuff soon. Take care.